3 guns, 1 graveyard, and a stare so cold it froze death in its tracks. When Clint Eastwood stepped into the circle, only one man was ever walking away. Join me till end of this video and subscribe my channel for more. The wind whispered through the gravestones like it knew what was coming. Dust danced lazily in the scorching sun, and every heartbeat in the vast emptiness seemed to echo across miles. At the center of Sad Hill Cemetery stood 3 men frozen in position, bound by greed, betrayal, and the silence of unfinished business. Blonde, Tuco, Angel Eyes. Each stood a few paces apart, forming a perfect triangle, not by design but by destiny. The dying light painted long shadows behind them, and the earth felt heavier beneath their boots. As if even the ground held its breath, Clint Eastwood's character, Blonde, didn't twitch. His hand hovered near his pistol, his eyes hidden. Beneath the brim of his hat, calm, calculating, cold, the kind of stillness that only comes from facing death so many times. It stopped scaring you. Tuco, wild-eyed and sweating, shifted his feet. His fingers twitched slightly, betraying nerves. He'd survived through chaos, through trickery, but now he was caught in something far more dangerous. Order, and then there was Angel. Eyes stoic, ruthless, the kind of man who believed in power. More than luck, his confidence was deadly. He knew he had to kill 2 men to win, and that the wrong blink could be his last. They didn't speak. They didn't move. Ennio Morricone's haunting score swelled, not in the room, but in the soul of anyone watching. The tension was unbearable. Even the vultures circling above hesitated. It wasn't just a duel. It was a reckoning. 3 men, 1 buried fortune, and no room for mercy. And still, Blondie didn't blink. Because when Clint Eastwood stands in a circle of death, he doesn't wait to survive. He calculates to win. The world had stopped turning. Birds that once chirped fell silent. Even the wind held its breath, waiting, watching. The sun beat down on the dry earth, making the dust shimmer like fire. But inside that circle of death, the air was ice cold. Each man stood still, as if carved from granite, as if time itself had been trapped inside their boots. Tuco's eyes darted from one man to the other. His breath came faster now. He tried to mask it, but it was there, the fear. Not fear of dying, but fear of not being the one left standing. He had danced through danger his entire life, outwitted sheriffs, and talked his way out of nooses. But this wasn't a crooked sheriff's office or a dark alley. This was a chessboard with no second move. Angel Eyes didn't flinch. His stare was sharp and calculating, like a snake coiled for the strike. His hand hovered near his gun, but he knew better than to rush. He had killed for less than gold before, and he'd do it again. But this wasn't about money. This was about being the last man spoken of in whispered legend. The one who outdrew the best. And then there was Blondie, Clint Eastwood, who didn't blink, didn't sweat, didn't even seem to breathe. His hat shadowed his eyes, but there was no mistaking the calculation happening behind them. He wasn't nervous. He was measuring every breath, every muscle twitch, every bead of sweat on the brows of the other 2 men. He stood like a man who had already decided what was going to happen. Like he'd seen the outcome before anyone else entered the graveyard. The silence was unbearable. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic pulse of Ennio Morricone's score building, the music not just part of the film, but part of the duel. It replaced their heartbeats. It filled the spaces where words dared not enter. Seconds stretched into eternities. A hand twitched. A brow flinched. A breath was held just a little too long. Tuco's hand moved lightning fast, but he wasn't the only one. Gunfire erupted like thunder, splitting the desert. Dust flew. Echoes cracked through the gravestones. Birds exploded into the sky in a chaotic spiral, but only 1 man was hit, and only 1 man didn't even need to reload. When the smoke cleared, the legend had already begun. The echo of the gunfire was still bouncing off the stone crosses as the graveyard seemed to exhale again. The moment that had stretched forever was over in less than 3 seconds. But for those who stood in that circle or tried to, it was an eternity paid in blood. Angel Eyes hit the ground first. His body didn't fall with drama or noise, just the hollow, final collapse of a man who had calculated wrong. A bullet. To the chest, clean, cold, unmistakable. Blondie didn't fire twice. He didn't need to. Tuco stood frozen, wide-eyed, his pistol still locked in his trembling hands, but it hadn't fired. He pulled the trigger again. Click, nothing, empty. Blondie had known. He had unloaded Tuco's gun the night before. Planned it, executed it. A two-man duel disguised as three, because in Clint Eastwood's world you don't leave justice. To chance, Tuco spun toward him, shaking with fury and disbelief. You ... You set me up. Blondie, calm as the grave around him, stepped forward. The wind caught the corner of his duster coat, flaring it just enough to remind everyone that this wasn't just a man, this was the West made flesh. You're alive? Ain't you? He said coolly. That's more than he got. Tuco looked down at Angel Eye's still body. No twitch, no breath. Just the desert taking back what belonged to it. The gold they had hunted, bled, and betrayed for lay somewhere. Beneath their boots, in one of the thousands of graves. But at that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the silence. The understanding that only one man had ever truly been in control. Blondie holstered his gun with that same quiet precision, no flair, no smile. Just the kind of grace that commies from surviving too many standoffs and always walking away. There are two kinds of people in this world. Tuco, he said, turning his back, those with loaded guns. And those who dig. Tuco's face turned pale. Again, you son of a, but Blondie was already walking toward the distant grave. The one he had marked in his memory. Calm, steady, the gun still warm at his hip. The legend growing with every step, because in the West, death didn't need a speech. It just needed a stare and a bullet. Tuco stood there panting, his hands shaking, eyes darting between Blondie and the graveyard that surrounded them like a silent jury. The desert sun burned hotter now, though it hadn't moved, but something had changed. The air was thicker, heavier, like it carried the weight of 100 unfinished duels. The echo of Blondie's words still rang in Tuco's ears, those with loaded guns and those who dig. Blondie tossed a rusty shovel at Tuco's feet. The clang of it hitting the dry ground was like a gavel striking down judgment. Tuco flinched. You can't be serious. Tuco shouted, voice breaking. I thought we were partners. Blondie didn't answer. He simply stepped back, hand resting, lightly on his holstered revolver. That silence said everything. Partnership was over. This wasn't about gold anymore. This was about control. And Clint Eastwood's Blondie? He never lost control. Tuco dropped to his knees, cursing under his breath as he dug. The dry earth gave up nothing easily. His shirt clung to him with sweat. Blisters began to form as the old wood of the shovel handle bit into his palms. Grave after grave blurred into one as Tuco clawed his way toward whatever was buried beneath. Blondie stood like a statue, his shadow growing long over the graves, like a ghost watching his own legend unfold. He didn't pace. He didn't blink. He just waited. Because the grave wasn't for Angel Eyes. Not really. It was for every man who had underestimated him after what felt like hours. Tuco hit something solid. His fingers, trembling, clawed through the dirt and found it. A wooden chest, aged by time, but intact. His eyes widened. Gold, he whispered. It's real. But Blondie didn't move toward it. Tuco looked up, confused. What now? We split it, right? Blondie smirked. Barely. You know the deal. I keep the gun, you dig? That was our partnership. Tuco's jaw tightened. You used me. Blondie finally stepped forward, his boots crunching the gravel. He stopped just beside Tuco, looking down not at the gold, but at Tuco, broken, exhausted and on his knees. I didn't use you, he said coldly. I outlived you. The moment hung there, not cruel, just honest. Because in the West, there's no room for friendship when the stakes are this high, only legends and the price it takes to become one. The grave now lay open. The gold chest sat at the edge, its aged wood cracked but solid, glinting faintly in the sun like a final temptation. Tuco stood beside it, drenched in sweat, his breath ragged. His hands were caked in dirt. The shovel had long since dropped to the side, but it wasn't over, not yet. Blondie walked a slow circle around him, eyes never leaving Tuco's face. Then, with calculated grace, he took out a length of coarse rope from his saddlebag and approached. the nearest gnarled tree growing up from between two graves. Tuco's eyes widened. No, no, don't tell me. Blondie didn't respond. He climbed onto a weathered tombstone, tied the rope into a noose, and tossed the end over the low-hanging branch. The loop swayed like a pendulum in the desert breeze, casting a shadow that looked far too much like a warning. "You're gonna hang me?" Tuco gasped. "After all this?" "After we found it?" Blondie walked back toward him, revolver drawn casually. "I'm not gonna hang you," he said. "Coolly." "You're gonna hang." Tuco backed away, but he knew. It was the same trick as before, the rope, the gold, the high noon tension. But this time he wasn't so sure Blondie would fire in time. Not anymore. Not after what had happened. Blondie motioned with the gun. "Get up there." Reluctantly, Tuco climbed onto the wobbly tombstone. The noose slipped over his neck like a handshake from death. His feet barely balanced. His breathing was fast and shallow. "You wouldn't do it," he muttered. "Not? For real, not now." Blondie aimed, calm, straight, his face unreadable. Then he stepped back, slowly holstered his weapon, and mounted his horse. Tuco panicked. Hey, you son of a, you can't leave me like this, Clint." Blondie turned slightly in the saddle. The wind picked up behind him, stirring his coat like a curtain before the final act. He reached into his saddlebag and tossed something. Through the air, it landed at the base of the tree with a thud, a bullet, one, single, bullet. "You want down?" he said, voice like distant thunder. "Use your teeth." Tuco screamed after him, thrashing, the rope tightening, his toes slipping on the smooth stone, but Blondie was already riding off. The sky above Sad Hill was empty now, no vultures, no witnesses. Just a man hanging between death and fortune, and a legend on horseback fading into the horizon. Once again the only man who knew how to end a story without saying goodbye, long after the sound of hoofbeats had faded into the sun-baked horizon. The graveyard returned to stillness. Sad Hill was quiet again, as quiet as death, as empty as the graves that hadn't yet been filled. Tuco dangled, his boots scraping the stone beneath him, straining every muscle to stay balanced. A single bullet lay in the dirt just beyond reach. Glinting in the light like a cruel joke from God, he cursed. He begged, he twisted, but deep down he knew this was Blondie's justice, not swift. Not clean dot and somewhere in that graveyard? Angel Eyes was still lying cold in the dust, eyes staring at the sky that never blinked. His story had ended with the sharp report of a revolver. A clean death. Tuco's fate was different. His was a punishment meant to be felt, measured, remembered. Some say he got out. That he bent down, bit that bullet, and freed himself with sheer desperation. Others say the vultures came first. But no one really knows. Because in the stories of the West, the facts aren't what matter. The legend is Dot and Blondie. He disappeared into the golden hills with half the gold and all the glory. He didn't boast, didn't write it down. He didn't need to. Every man, woman, and outlaw, from El Paso to Santa Fe, would come to whisper his name in saloons, train cars, and desert outposts. The man in the hat. The one who doesn't blink. The one who never misses. But the truth was simpler. Clint Eastwood's Blondie didn't shoot to kill. He shot to warn. He shot to teach. And when he rode away, he left something heavier than a corpse. He left a memory no bullet could bury. Sad Hill became a place of legend. Not for the treasure buried beneath it, but for the lesson it carved in stone. In the West, there are no good guys. Only the ones who shoot last. And right away.